Hi, everybody. Hello, Sydney. Thank you for joining us today to talk about growth. Let me first start by introducing this powerhouse panel of rock stars that have decided to come and share their wisdom with us. So I'm going to let them do the pleasure of introducing themselves because I could never do it justice. So I'm going to start to my left. Cian, all you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Cian Mcloughlin. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Trinity Perspectives. We're in the sales training and transformation area. I'm also the author of a best-selling book called Rebirth of the Salesman. Thank you, Tiffani, which explores, oh, this is very nice, kind of how the evolution of the sales world. And I spend an inordinate amount of time talking to customers about why they make their buying decisions. So at the end of the sales cycle, and then we try and reverse engineer what they tell us to improve the sales process of the organizations that we work with. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you for being here, Cian. Naomi Simson, over to you.
I'm the founder of Red Balloon and the co-founder of the Big Red Group. And at the Big Red Group, we're all about shifting the way people experience life. And so part of that means that we have to choose a platform to serve different customers in different ways at different times, depending on the job we've been hired to do. In addition to being an entrepreneur and the Chief Marketing Officer, the CMO of the Big Red Group, I also, for my sins, am an author. And also you might know me from Shark Tank on Channel 10.
And over to you, Ron.
My name is Ron Kaufman. I'm author of a New York Times best-selling book called Uplifting Service, but the book is sold out, so I don't
Oh, look, there you go.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
I define service. I define service as taking action to create value for someone else, which makes sense no matter what business you're in or where you are within the business. But I also define service excellence as taking the next step that will create more value for someone else. And that can make sense whether you're a person sitting in a call center, whether you have a small team, whether you're an entrepreneur of a small business, running a large organization for growth.
Excellent. Well, when we were getting ready to do this panel, it was, let's start at this level and work our way to sort of higher in the conversation. But I wanted to ground us in defining growth first. Because it was in a conversation I had with Naomi many years ago that not all companies want to grow, and they have to make a decision to want to grow. Because some people like growing at the rates they're growing or have a lifestyle business. And so it was a great reminder that we maybe need to first reflect internally before we start having these conversations about growth, about what it means to you individually, but more importantly, what it means to your company. So because I used you as the example, I'm going to start with you, Naomi, on sort of how do you define growth? And how do you get people in your own company rallied around what that means?
Yeah, it comes back to purpose. When I founded Red Balloon all those years ago, we had a clear purpose that we wanted to change gifting in Australia forever. We wanted people to consider the red voucher as a way to do gifts. But actually, really, if you think about what we do, we're a marketing company. We have, through our marketplaces, branded more than 3,500 small businesses, and that's what we do. And every day we just deliver customers to them. So feeling the responsibility of making sure that other small businesses are successful means that we have to keep delivering them customers. And that it's good for our society, it's good for our economy. We create jobs. So growth for us was about the number of customers we were serving. And so we've always had scoreboards about the number of customers we're serving versus our revenues or our, P&L or whatever. It's all about how many people did I make an impact to today? And that's inspiring.
Yeah, and I would say, I'm just going to dig into one stat on that. How many customers you served 2 years ago and how quickly versus how many customers you serve today and how quickly?
Well, I was in the Red Balloon business as CEO for 10 years and I left for 5 years to go and do other things like Shark Tank and write books and other things. And then I came back into the business now almost 2 years ago. And when we came back into the business, we were serving a customer about every 2.5 minutes. So we came up with a thesis and the short-term goal of could we serve a customer every minute? Could we serve an experience to an Australian or New Zealander every minute? And right now, 2 years later, we're serving a customer every 39 seconds. But we're not done yet. We have aspirations to serve an experience every second. And that drives us because ultimately through our program, it impacts not just Australians, but New Zealanders and the other markets we're beginning to work in.
Excellent. I love that stat. That's why I wanted you to say it, so thank you. So Ron, what does growth mean to you in the context of businesses that are trying to pivot towards finding their way and communicating that internally to their people?
Right, right. So whether it's an external customer or it's an internal employee or a colleague or a team member, if we recall that service excellence is taking the next action to create more value for someone else, then growth is determined by the experience of the someone else. Is what you did something that they said not only answered my question or solved my problem, but gave me something extra, pointed me in a direction, showed me something more. And of course, the Salesforce platforms and clouds are just so perfectly designed for that, so that your people do know more and can offer more, suggest more, recommend more. If the someone else says, wow, thank you, I got more than I expected in that interaction, that's how I define growth.
Excellent. Cian, over to you as a sales guide.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be really easy for me to say growth is revenue or growth is sales, and I think that's absolutely critical. But what's been fascinating in my journey over the last 20 years in the sales industry is seeing, as Naomi alluded to, how different metrics can be really, really important in determining growth. So yes, sales is absolutely essential, but not every deal is created equal. So if a deal from our install customer base costs us a lot less in terms of our time and effort and our loyalty and increases wallet share and demonstrates a level of stickiness with our customers, well, that's really interesting to me. If we're growing the number of referrals we're getting from our install customers, that says a whole lot about the culture of the business and the way we're servicing our customers. And I think possibly the most interesting thing that I've found in talking to so many customers about what influenced their buying decision was how often product and price get us from the long list to the short list, and how often people and purpose get us from the short list to being the selected vendor. So I think growth has to look at both those metrics. It has to be, yes, revenue, but it equally has to be something else, something more intangible around purpose or people or culture.
So metrics is a sort of hot button that I hear whenever I'm traveling around the world and people start talking about this experience and up-leveling and customer every second and those kinds of things. But individual contributors sometimes have a very difficult time tying the two together, of the aspiration of the company. And so, hey, what do I do every day and how does my role contribute to this goal of the business? And so I'd love to hear from you, because I think this is something that we've seen from our research anyway, totally shifting what metrics are most important to companies, besides the obvious, right? What was your top line revenue and how much did you sell? Like, besides the obvious. I'd love to hear, Ron, why don't we start with you, sort of what you've seen someone do unique that you thought was really unique from a metric perspective.
Right. So the top line revenue, bottom line profit, share of market, share of wallet, those are all lagging indicators that come from all the service you provide. The leading indicator that will let you know you're going to get there is your survey scores, NPS and others. The leading indicator that's going to let you know you're having good scores is social commentary, is lots of compliments and positive feedback and online reviews from your customers. Now, what triggers those? That's what needs to be measured, and that's the number of new actions, new steps, new next that your people are actually taking that's leading to a compliment. A compliment's not going to come just by serving somebody the way they expected. It's got to be something extra. It's got to be something more. So then if you're counting those, how many new ideas, new actions, new insights are our people coming up with, that will lead to your compliments, which will lead to your scores, which will lead to your final financial results. But very few companies actually measure how many new ideas have we come up with today? How many new actions have we taken for that customer?
So I'm going to make this sort of a little bit interactive. This is strange, I get it. It's strange for us too, because we actually cannot hear each other almost. But I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. How many of you, your companies, track that? Next action, next idea as a metric? A couple.
We've got 2 out of an audience of 150.
All right, Naomi, what have you sort of found besides the per second, right, from a metric perspective to get the team rallied, or is that the one? That could be the one.
No, it's for us, social commentary is really important, and when you have no customers and you remember the very first customer and how you felt, it's how do you engender that feeling of honoring, respecting the choice that someone just made, because I know what it's like to have no customers. I know what it's like to have a business in decline. So how do you share the energy of what represents growth and opportunity? And for me, it's always customer stories. One by one, who do we make a difference to today, and amplifying those stories and listening to them. So whenever I'm having a bad day, a tough day, I just hang out in our contact centre and I just listen to customers, and I hear the impact that we've had, the wedding proposal that was made, the birthday gift that got somewhere that they didn't think was possible, and we made someone's day. Now, for every time we make someone's day, which is one of the things we talk about, we know that there's an opportunity for social commentary, as Ron calls it. We just call it amplification. So when I first started, there was no such thing as social media. Whereas now, I know that if people say, oh my goodness, that red balloon thing, it just worked. Or, oh, I didn't even know I could book my whole school holidays for my kids on adrenaline. I didn't even know I could do that. And that for us is a very important listening tool of the amplification. And that's where we get our energy from, because it's the distance to the customer. The closer you are to the customer in your listening posts is what drives the energy. And remembering, we're all people doing business with people, even though we're in an online world. We're just one person helping another person help get something that they want that makes their day. That's what we do.
Okay, by a show of hands, how many of you are doing social listening to track as a performance sort of look forward indicator of what you think Net Promoter Scores or CSAT will be? A handful. Okay. All right. On to you, Cian. So we've got about 10, 12 people that are doing this, okay, so far?
So I was fascinated by what Ron and Naomi had to say there, because I think if you take that social proof piece, you then mix in the stories, something really interesting happens. We've seen a trend in recent, certainly in the last couple of years, where sales rep comes in, gives their presentation, puts up the logo slide, which we all the logos. And then something really interesting happens. The people sitting on the customer or the prospect side start taking notes and go, I know someone who works there, I know someone who works there, and immediately start reference checking you before you've even prepared your references. So the social proofing and the storytelling piece are actually weaving their way back to the very start of the sales cycle. So I would ask the question, in terms of what metrics should we be tracking, one of them is very, very closely tied to what customers of ours not only will refer us, but will speak kindly or will speak positively about us when we're not in the room. So that's very, very different from the references that we sort of manage and we look after. This is when they get the phone call from someone saying, hey, we just had a sales rep in here. They talked about this platform. It all looked great on paper. You use these guys. What do you think, yes or no? And I think there's a lot more we can do as businesses to actually track the referral customer success piece. So I'd ask, or you can ask for the show of hands again, as to how many people, how many organizations are actually being really proactive about saying, how are we tying together referrals, customer success as a vehicle to actually drive the growth of our business?
By a show of hands, how many are you doing that? So all up, in those three sort of, leading indicator kinds of metrics, we maybe had 20 people total raise their hands. So the point and the reason I asked that is because as we start talking about all that's happening around orienting towards the customer, which I'll get to in a second, is people are struggling with how do they then pivot the way they measure and reward the people who work within organizations. That it's aspirational, but people need to know, what do I need to do every single day, right? Mm-hmm. And so if all those things are equal, as leaders and advisors for companies, how do you, hopefully the people in the audience today that have heard the keynote are going to go back and be the storytellers of what they heard at the event over the last, few hours. Mm-hmm. What would you give them as advice for how do they share the story of what they think they should be, what they should be doing as a business internally to maybe even in some cases reinvigorate growth? How would you recommend that?
I'll jump in on this one because I think we saw something this morning on the main stage in the keynote, which was a face at the center of everything and a customer at the center of everything. And I think so much of it comes back to that. Customers can help us innovate. We can, we can grow our wallet share. They're going to be part of our partnering community. they're the ones that will hold us to account when our products fall short or when our services fall short. So, it sounds trite to say it, but there's a lovely anecdote about Jeff Bezos leaving a chair empty in every meeting he's in to represent the customer being at the heart of everything we do.
Right.
And as many of us know, as you work in larger and larger organizations, you can get further and further removed from your customer, and there's a huge danger in doing that. So I think our customers are there. We talk to them all the time, and they're like an open book. We need to bring them inside the tent more and more frequently as we innovate, as we do whatever it is that we intend to do with our businesses, because they'll show us the right way, and they'll show us when we're getting off track.
So Naomi, this is probably a tough question for you because you're sort of also a very public voice for the business. But what do you do to stay close to the customer? So you mentioned one, which is you'll listen into phone calls. But what else do you do to stay close to those customers?
It's actually why I come out here. Someone will stop me and say I had a red balloon experience. Somebody will stop me and say I've got a recognition program going and let me tell you what happens. So one of the reasons I started leaving the office and speaking and going to events was just so I could meet my customers. Because we only ever hear from 4% of our customers, which is a very low percentage. So we're doing a lot, in terms of frictionless, that's very nice, but it's also not giving us the feedback loop. So when I consider businesses, and the question I'll be taking back to my own organisation is how many steps are you from a listening post to a customer? It's very easy for the entrepreneur. I can't help myself. How many people here have been on a red balloon experience? A little bit more opportunity in the room, just saying. We can't help ourselves. That's what entrepreneurs do. We're always there pitching and selling and whatever. And every one of you represents an opportunity to me as an entrepreneur. But my team don't feel the same way. They don't necessarily see everybody that they meet as an opportunity, a potential supplier, a potential partner, a potential amplifier. So my job is to make sure that we have those listening posts and we're that connected with that amount of energy. So when I look at growth, and this is what happened when I left the business, there's 3 primary drivers to growth. There's leadership, strong leadership, there's people, and there's customer. And I use customer as a singular rather than a plural because everyone is an individual. They're not a target, they're not a number, they have a choice. So then I consider how do we listen to customer deeply and intimately in a way, whether it's NPS score, that we are harnessing what they really think. And when I came back to the business 5 years later, these were the 3 missing things. People didn't know what they were there to do. Number one thing. People had stopped listening to customer and started talking about what we want to do and what would make it better for the customer, whether they like it or not. And the other thing was they weren't making tough decisions. And leadership isn't just about, this is how I want to unite everybody to the cause. This is like, oh my gosh, we've got to get rid of these legacy systems. Oh my goodness, this is no longer working for us. We need to do these things. These are hard, tough decisions to align our people to the cause. So when I think about it, I go, those organizations who have powerful listening posts, whether it's customer advisory. So I often work with really big organizations, and the thing that bothers them the most in their market share surveys is new incumbents. These are the startups. These are the people who bother them. And if I think about, let's say, the drinks industry, we've got great Australian gins. Let's talk about alcohol. Oh, too early in the day. But let's talk about alcohol, and we've got Archie Rose, we've got Four Pillars, we've got wonderful gins coming up. They are taking the big foreign companies' market share. And why? It's because all of those brands get experience. They meet their customers. They get them involved in the process. They listen to their customers deeply. So for big customers to begin to grow, it's how do I engage my customers to be my advocates? Years and years ago, I worked for an airline which was called Ansett, and most of you have not heard of that, which is kind of sad. And, it was started by an entrepreneur. And one of the things I did when heading up frequent travel was to have customer advisory meetings. And I would bring them in and I'd say, what do you want? And they'd tell me things like, we want to be the last to check in and the first to board, the last to board and the first off and the first to get luggage. All the things we now take for granted. In those days, I could not affect change. So the other thing is if you're going to listen, You have to be able to affect change. So a big business that I work with, I know that they are using social media to harness their customers into community. 67,000 customers they put new product ideas to. Unless their customers say yes, they don't launch. And when they do launch, they go back to customer and say, we did it because you asked for it. And guess what? Those 67,000 people become advocates. So size is not an excuse for not being close to customer. But as businesses get bigger and bigger and bigger and there's less entrepreneurial energy, you find that it becomes more internally focused rather than externally focused.
So there's so much to unpack there, but like that was like a master class in entrepreneurship. So I'm gonna ask Ron a question, and I'm gonna lead you. Hopefully, I'll take you to the water, and you're gonna drink for me for just a second.
All right.
But I often have conversations about sort of improving the sales, from a growth perspective. Those three, and now we've got customers, but we tend to then fail our customers once they become a customer. And so from a service perspective, sort of how you framed that up in the beginning when you introduced yourself, I think it's a huge opportunity as a growth lever for businesses, not just to get new customers and close the business, but then to keep them, to get them to amplify on your behalf. So talk a little bit about using service in that context as a growth lever.
Yeah, I think of that as the difference between a service transaction, where you're looking to get a new customer, close a deal, deliver a product or a service, get paid, hopefully get a positive testimonial at best, to a service relationship where it's ongoing over time, you're the steady supplier, you're going to have that repeat revenue coming in, to what I call a service partnership, where over time, you're actually getting more from that customer and even more from that customer and even more from that customer, and that could be more purchase volume, it could be actual referrals, not just likelihood to recommend, or it could be positive testimonials on your behalf, speaking up in your favor, etc. But notice that when I drew that in the air, it wasn't like one side got bigger and the other didn't. In other words, if you want to get more and more from them, they also want to get more and more from you. And so in order for them to give you more of their portfolio, for example, you've got to deliver what you already promised, but deliver it a little bit better than they expected. And then after you've actually grown the portfolio and you want recommendations, you've got to do something else to help them in their life. Now notice I said not just help them as a customer, I said in their life. So one of the problems I have with these ideas of putting a customer's face in the center is you are seeing a person, but that person lives in a world. They have a family, they have a neighborhood, they have a community, they have concerns, they have other areas of interest. And of course, with the kind of platforms and clouds that you have at Salesforce, you can find out a lot about that. With MuleSoft now, you can be able to pull in so much understanding of that customer that after they've become your one-time customer and you've satisfied them, and then they've come back as a repeat customer and you've delighted them, then how are you going to have the value continue to grow? And that's where you want to be more proactive, more anticipatory, more intimate, if you will, with each and every one of those customer interactions. But of course, you need the information on how to do that. You need recommendations on what to propose. And that's why for me at the keynote today, what was so eye-opening and heart-opening was the way in which Einstein in particular can be able to take databases and turn it into actionable ideas and advice.
Yeah, and whenever people say sort of this intimate customer relationship, I want to put an asterisk and go, intimate does not mean creepy.
At all.
Right, at all. Like intimate just means when I show up, you know me, you treat me like you know me, you communicate with me like you know me, not dear valued customer, not Tiffani Bova, dear Tiffani Bova, not dear Tiffani. That's sort of table stakes 10 years ago personalization. It's, dear Tiffani, you did this 3 months ago. We think that this will be good for you 3 months from now or right now. And that's very different.
Tiffani, let me add just one more word.
Yeah.
You know me, you remember me, you like me, you appreciate me, and you care about me.
Absolutely.
And that's where the intimacy is human.
Yeah, and I think caring is because you're taking the data and doing something with it, right? But I'd say that, not all growth is good growth. Sometimes you'll get growth because you're too focused on the top line, and you might be acquiring customers that will quickly leave you or will drain resources from you and ask for lots of things and get people all excited about things that you don't do, and you're just trying to satisfy that customer. And so what do you do in making sure that when you make a conscious decision as a business, which we started this panel out with, to actually grow, that you grow with the right customers, you acquire the right customers that are right for your business, so that you can align those things in a way that you are able to deliver them this delight and success. So I'm going to start with you, Cian. What do you think, how do you figure out who should you be going for when you're looking for growth?
Look, I think the first thing you have to do is pick your battles. You know, if you want to be known as all things to all people, effectively you're known as not a specialist in anything. So one of the things we're hearing a lot from customers is, you know, don't ask me what keeps me awake at night, tell me what should be keeping me awake at night. We want people coming in who, yes, you understand your technology, but then you also understand our industry, and then in the context of that, you can work at the intersection of those two things to actually guide us, to have the heart of a teacher. So a lot of what we're hearing in terms of buying decisions is, look, we looked at X number of platforms, and we saw 3 that we thought could, broadly speaking, do the job, and we hear the term apples for apples a lot. This is then what influenced our decision. This individual came in and could tell us things that we didn't know about our industry, or this person, you know, helped us get 40% of the way down the path. So I think the delivery comment that Ron made is absolutely critical. We have to earn the right to be seen as an expert in a particular industry vertical or, you know, a horizontal area. And as we do that, then something really interesting happens. If we lead with value, customers start to reciprocate. And one of the ways they can reciprocate is with their wallets, but another way they can reciprocate is by proactively making those introductions, by coming and standing on stages and speaking for us. So I think it's not trying to be all things to all people, but really, really getting clear on, you know, who are the best customers for us to serve, and then going out of our way to be amazing in how we do that. And if we can do that, we usually do okay.
Yeah, and Naomi, I know there's been instances where you've served a customer, and you have listened in on a call, and that customer is just not happy. And you have realized potentially you're not going to make them happy. And so you just sort of say, it's okay. So maybe you could talk the audience through when you're willing to walk away.
Yeah, so we run both consumer businesses and B2B businesses. And by the way, I'm looking for a general manager for our B2B business.
Oh my goodness,
so
shameless.
I'm an
Totally
entrepreneur, I can't help
shameless.
myself. But just if you want to talk to me about that, that'd be great. You get to work with me. Yeah, that just put everybody off. But let me talk about the consumer businesses, because I think it's really interesting. When I was outside of the business, all those years ago, if anybody's in a consumer retail business, you know it's not getting any easier to find customers. Customers are more fickle than ever. They're inundated with media messages, and therefore brand becomes materially important. And understanding, to your point, Tiffani, understanding what your brand stands for and also what it doesn't stand for. And I think that that's very important. We are absolutely a values-driven organisation. We do what we say we're going to do. We fail fast. We're one team. We're the best version of ourselves. And we listen to people bigly. We listen to them as larger than life. But ultimately, they're not always right. And remember, working in a two-sided marketplace, we must honour and respect our supply partners as well, because we must make sure that they are commercially successful businesses so I can keep sending them business. So sometimes we just have to say no. And they stamp their feet and they're angry and they say, how can you do that? And we say, because we believe and we know what we stand for. And that's a very, very important thing. When I came back to the business, the cost to acquire a consumer had gone from 5 cents when I used to diddle around with Google AdWords, from 5 cents to $50. This is not a sustainable business model. This took really tough decisions of making sure that we were choosing partners and platforms that would allow us to get a return from what became very expensive. So one of the things we did was scale the planet and look for the partners who could do that. So we found a tool in Israel which is called Albert. And Albert is an autonomous tool that only works in consumer marketing tools. He only connects to your first-party data, and he autonomously finds new customers. And literally, we sent him out, and he created 6,500 pieces of creative on the fly. And for the first time, we could create truly intimate customer interactions in a marketing sense. And we discovered so many things about our customers that we didn't know before. Like men over the age of 65 in Adelaide love flying. Who knew? I didn't know. So he was saying, get more flying experiences in South Australia. Okay. So off we went there. We used to spend for every $1, we'd get $5 back. Then every month we'd just increase his KPI to 1 to 6. At Christmas he was delivering for every $1, 16 in return. This means that I've got the capital I need to be able to invest in true customer experience. But here's the trick now. We also obviously have pretty much every cloud. We've got Marketing Cloud, Sales Cloud, Community Cloud, Service Cloud, Commerce Cloud. Which ones have I forgotten?
Social Studio.
Social Studio. It doesn't actually have cloud in its name, but we have that as well. And, with a 1% pledge and with a V2 Mom, you could say we drank the Kool-Aid. But here's the thing. Albert externally now works with Einstein on the inside.
Wow.
How good's that? So he takes the customer and he then serves that data into Einstein so we know how to treat that customer, and then I can get true scale through my platforms to serve different customers, different jobs for different reasons at different times. And then when they actually come to us, we can deliver them over the phone some level of understanding, personalization, intimacy, that they know us. And let me tell you, that is now table stakes. And I am so glad that we invested in AI now 20 months ago, because for those who have not invested in AI in either platform, either your internal systems such as Salesforce or your external, you are not building the data and the gathering to be able to, and it's only getting harder. It's not getting any easier.
Well, so you've hit on a topic that I think is one that gets sort of not covered as much as others, and that is that the majority of companies sort of globally and statistically will hit a growth stall at some point in their tenure, meaning a quarter or 2 or 3 of no growth, flat growth, or declining growth. And when you find yourself in that growth stall, like if you're in that 85%, it takes a lot of effort to get out of it. So I think one of the things you've just mentioned here is taking that opportunity to look at the data to help give you the signals you may need to anticipate the fact that you're going to be facing a growth stall.
Yeah.
And so how do you get ahead of that? So Ron, what would you say around it's getting harder to attract a customer, it's getting harder to grow, most businesses are going to hit a stall. How do you sort of help these folks think about what they could do?
I think the related point here that's not been brought up as much is you also need to attract and keep the best talent. And so whether you're growing very quickly, like a Salesforce, and need to keep attracting people such as yourself, who joined the company, and I asked you why, and you said, well, the number one reason was because of the culture. So then all of this intensive focus on creating greater intimacy and adding more value, it can't only be externally focused. It's also got to be generated internally in alignment with certain key values, where the team has got to get very clear on what the values are and then make the world of that. So for example, we're sitting on this side of the room, but all the way over on the other side is Salesforce.org, and the 1% pledge, and the 3 million hours. And I look at that and I think, now how did that help them make more money? Well, it makes the whole company more attractive, not only for customers to ultimately make a choice. As you said, it's more about products, about people, and it's not about the price and the product anymore, but also for attracting great people. And whether you're growing faster, you need to get back into growth, you're going to need to attract the best talent. And so building that culture inside the organization of taking better and better and better care, and I don't mean paying more and more. I mean helping people become more of what they want to become, developing their career, developing their capabilities, getting them on the next step of Trailhead as one example, is a way of building the environment that attracts and retains those people.
Yeah, and that's the soft stuff. And you often hear that the soft stuff is actually the hard stuff, that the hard stuff is actually easy, that the soft stuff is actually really hard.
Yes.
Right? That's the people and the processes and the culture and onboarding and what kind of company and values and cultures do you want and what kind of people do you want to bring in, because your customers will only be as happy as your employees. If you have a really unhappy customer service representative and you have a really great customer that calls in, that's a bad combination. Right? Because then not so happy employee is getting the really happy customer to feel like, boy, I felt like I shouldn't have called in. Yeah. Like,
interrupted their day.
Yeah, totally, I interrupted their day. Yeah. So we've got a few minutes left, and I want to sort of give you an opportunity to sort of say, what do you think Although in my book I say there's not one thing. I'm going to ask you, what's one thing? What's the one thing you would give people that to think about as they go back off into the land of the soft stuff?
Yep.
It's really hard.
Well, I think what I'd say is, you know, people buy with their hearts and they justify with their heads a lot of the time.
Yep.
And as an industry, the mistake we make too often is we're selling directly to people's heads. So we're selling on features and functions and benefits, whereas actually, and Ron alluded to this, there's kind of above the line decision-making criteria. Will this impact our business, and you know, will it impact our bottom line? What's the business case? But there's a whole lot of other things, which is, do I feel comfortable with this new technology, or do I feel it's beyond my capability? Did I go into bat for the technology we're going to be replacing, and a myriad of other different things. So I think if we go in and I'm talking to the salespeople in the room through a sales lens, if we go in with the heart of a teacher and try and give value and create reciprocity, get something back in return, we take the pressure off our customers and we take the pressure off ourselves as well, and invariably we get to a much better outcome. Whereas if we go in, you know, to your analogy of we've hit a stall, we go in and we double down on the salesiness. We double down on we have to hit our revenue numbers. What actually happens is very subtly they step back from us because no one wants to be sold to. They want to be helped. They want to be engaged with. So I think that's a really important point is sell to the heart as well as the head. Engage with people on a human level, because B2B is a fallacy. B2C is a fallacy. It's just people dealing with people. If we can keep that connection and just be professional, because so much of the feedback we get from customers as to why they didn't go with one organization was they were unprofessional, they felt risky, they felt, you know, they didn't do the basics well. So just do that, see the people who are sitting across the table from you and engage with them, and you won't go too far wrong.
All right, Naomi. I'm going to hold you to one thing.
I know.
Sorry.
One thing, success breeds success. Having been in a business that's in epic growth and then to see it stall and go into decline, the only thing that we could do was really get it back into success, because people want to hang out in a place that is successful, that is focused, that has shared vision, shared values, and ultimately people do want to be a part of success.
Sorry. It's like when people ask why I decided to work at Salesforce, it's just these like three guys walking by.
Yeah.
She's talking away about all this stuff, and all of a sudden
Really
I'm like, oh, hey,
important.
Cody. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I just
Thanks,
what's going on.
Cody.
Anyway, sorry. It's like that just sort of summed it up. Anyway, go ahead, keep going.
Exactly.
Sorry.
And yeah, exactly. We are all people with personalities, but there's nothing like success breeds success. And people do want to be a part of a successful team. So for me, sometimes I said to another entrepreneur, she goes, oh, my team never meet their numbers. And I said, make the numbers lower. You know, don't set a benchmark for success that is unattainable and unachievable. A BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, is supposed to be possible, not impossible. It's just not probable. And so that people can experience and celebrate success, because that is what drives people ultimately.
Excellent. One thing, Ron.
And could you hold up that book just
we're
one
gonna
more time for the camera right here? There you go.
Oh, for the camera guy.
Because that's success.
Shameless, Naomi Simson.
So my one point is, remember the definition. Service is taking action to create value for someone else. A lot of people, especially after training, will think that their job is to take the action, make sure they get it right, follow the procedure, do the steps. But what's the purpose of that? It's to create value. But who gets the value? Someone else. So actually, whether or not it's valuable is not determined by the actions you took. It's by someone else's opinion, their experience. And so the place to begin is the level of curiosity and care and wonder that you have about the world of the other person. What are they trying to achieve? What are they trying to avoid? What do they really want to accomplish? Therefore, what is it that they would value in this situation, in this moment? Now I can figure out what are the actions that I can take. And so all of the data and all of the recommendation engines and all of that will show us possible actions, but the purpose ultimately is to produce value for another human being.
Well, with that, I just want to take a moment to thank my panel. Naomi and I actually have copies of our books over there on that table. We'll be signing them after the session. It's first come, first serve. Hopefully we have enough. But I just want to thank you guys for choosing to spend 40 minutes with me and the team. So let's give a hand to the panelists.
You guys.
And let's give a hand to the team. So let's give a hand to the panelists. 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 And I just want to personally thank you for spending your day with us here at World Tour Sydney and for choosing to be Salesforce customers. So thank you, guys.